Yes, you confirm that you bought only one car. But how comes your name appear on many of these lists? Why? He replied to answer that he said, yeah, he said he is not the only farmer Sediba in the country. Alright, 366 German vehicles accounted. Mr. Sediba further informed the committee that following German's departure, they counted, calmed down on his vehicles and had counted 366 vehicles, including Rolex cars and limousines. He said only 122 vehicles were found to be roadworthy, while 120 were not roadworthy, and 124 was a scrap vehicle. Sediba explained that during his time exercise, which vehicle were seized from these individuals, secured officially and instructions, and some were immediately assigned by the new coalition government to income. Officials essentially, vehicles were literally taken from personnel of the old regime and handed to people that were incoming in the new regime, he said. When inquiry members have found some discrepancies in the numbers provided by Mr. Sediba, the witness attributed this to duplication. So that's a very interesting article on Standard Newspaper this afternoon regarding the asset of the former president Yahya Jammeh. And be reminded, you are listening to daily podcast live on King TV and King. This program brings you speed with all the latest that you need to know about the current affairs in the country regarding the newspapers as well. Still to come on your daily podcast, chaos at Carnifing as a court remains 23 protesters. Mayor Bensouda start local government commission testimonies, and of course NCC alarm government politicians inciting tribalism. Ex-minister says Barrow likely to win unless a coalition. So let's try to bring you speed all that you need to know regarding the papers on this current happens as we rightly speak. So, but before all that coming to, because we're having some difficulties with our internet system in the studio, let's try to go into this cannot be. So we're having a connection problem here. So Pura, you know, as we always say on this program, we need quality service, whether the price is high or low, but the service has to be there. That is what's more relevant to us here. Let's take you with all the speed that you need to know about the latest happenings in the country as we speak. Updates by Kemeseng Sane on the detained Pura data float protesters. Update on the detain of 44 youths. A report on a visit to the police station and a prison to check on 44 detainees youths. They were arrested during a peaceful assembly. visited the police headquarters in Banjul, where 15 youths are being ably held, including 5 girls. The girls were in the same in small cell in a corner of the station with only a mat and a concrete flat for them to sit on. I spoke with Alhagie Fatty, who told me his phone was confiscated upon his arrest and he had been denied access to his family and a lawyer. He was taken to an office of the State Intelligence Service (SIS) at 11 a.m. to give a statement. He, along with the other 14 detainees involved in his right to remain silent. At the Mile 2 Central Prison, the foreign youths are being held on remand. Lamin Dafe, Lamin C, Babu Seka, Yusfa Telo, and Tony Koli, Ali Cham, Abulai Tiba, Alhaji Sar, Bakari Jame, Musa Conte, Rofi Kamara, Ansumana Ture, Bakar J. Sanyam, Lamin FM Marigo, Fatu Gallo Sise, Yaya Jaite, Sisaho Danso, Suleiman Manga, Ibrahim Jata, Ibrahim B. Keita, Musa Sanyam, Musa Sisoho, and Ibrahim Jallo. The boys are in high spirit and committed to continue their fight for a country based on the rule of law, justice, and accountability. However, some have started a hunger strike to protest their alleged illegal detention and the denial of their right to peaceful assembly. At this prison gate, heavily armed soldiers and prison guards were visible. The soldiers had a cannon truck with large guns, while the guards were in full gear with AK-47 rifles. At Kairaba police station, 6 youths are being detained. Lamin B.I. Umar Sanyang, Abulai Kamara, Lamin Jame, and Safi Lo. The youths shared that the police office at this station have been kind and respectful. Safi Lo, a female detainee, is in a separated cell within the same room as the boys. I noticed 2 boys in her cell area and immediately raised the issue with the office on the duty, whose promised to move the boys to their own cell to ensure separation. At Kotu police station, I was informed that I could not see the detainee, Umar Kamara, because he was being held. In Communicado, I managed to see his eyes. I thought a small window in his cell door. While standing, he was moved to Kairaba police station in golf car. So that's the latest on those things, as we rightly seen on the documents. Njokuba was banned from holding public office over corruption allegation in 2021. He decided to support President Barros's campaign after election. He was pardoned and appointed Director General of Pura. Same Njoku is now alleged assisting GSM operators exploiting Gambians. On Friday, a group of youths, protesters against the exploitation, they were arrested and detained. Today, Magistrate Thomas Ature of the Kanifing Municipal Council Court ordered that all the youths are being remanded at Mile 2 operation. So, those are the latest on this. So, the opposition GDC, has condemned the immediate and unconditional release of protesters, including journalist Yusfa Telo, Flex Dam, rapper Alucham Akila X, and Gala Secretary General Jallo, who were detained after demonstrating against a new data price floor introduced by the Public Utility Regulatory Pura. So those were the latest regarding the day-to-day affairs of the country in the Gambia. So let's cross over to the other place to and see what's happening to, because activists Madi Jawade was tear gassed by police and is currently receiving 3 men at Westfield Clinic. That was yesterday as we speak. As you can see, is on the social media. Several journalists covering the Pura protest on Monday were affected by the tear gas when police removed when police disparate demonstrators, they were later taken to Cardiff General Hospital, where many were attended by the nurse and Nyima together with other staff on the duty. The medical team provided a timely treatment, ensuring the journalists' symptoms from the gas were managed quickly and effectively. Some of the journalists also sought medical attention at the Gambia Red Cross, where staff assisted in managing their condition following the incident as well. So it was a chaotic yesterday at the Carnifing Municipal Council Court gate. So now the Local Government Inquiry Commission is still proceeding this afternoon. The mayor of Carnifing Municipal Council, Mr. Talib Bensuda, to appear in that as well. So of course still another inquiry committee that is also tasked to look over the asset of the former president Yahya Jammeh. The committee, which was headed by the National Assembly members, who are also taking this responsibility to go ahead with it. So for details on that, let's join the National Assembly committee team on the investigation.
From paragraphs 8 and 9, you can see that the High Court appointed Augustus Spong to be the receiver for this cocktail company. You can see that, right? Yes, very well. So, this is what after Mr. Spong's appointment by the High Court on the 22nd of May 2017, did your office have any communications or interactions with the receiver with regards to this cocktail company?
We are having more connection to our live stream regarding the inquiry of the assets of the former president. As we saw currently, there are a lot of stuff going on here. It's not easy like this. The moment tear gas brutally, hits actually. So some of the journalists and the bloggers and the TikTokers, majority of them also were struggling to get away. So public statement, Dr. Usman Kachiko. Now, this from Fatu, less than 2 hours is just news in. Appearing apparently is not always strategic forward to recognize when one is on the wrong side of the history. The fact that the government won't detain youth activity protesting against the poor price float shows just how out of a thought it is with the concern of average Gambians. This is a government that is behold so special interest. This article also is regarding that. So let's try to digest and bring you people all that you need to know. Why are Gambians artists quiet about Killer 8's arrest and detention, even though he fight for what will boost their views? So that's text is talking about that. So what's more important with the Gambians, just to remind ourselves and all the Gambians that the Gambia is still having the 1997 constitution in the country, and then which are totally abandoned on if you are a group of people, you cannot do any other thing, but you have to apply for a permit, and then with a permit you can do ABC and you can do ABCD and others. But without a permit, you don't do certain things. This country is still governed by these laws that we have to face. So that is the current affairs in the country right now. All eyes are on the 20 youths who are detained at the Mile 2 Central Prison. There are a lot of talks regarding their well-being and the conditions and whether the government will do the right thing they have. So all those are stuffed on the social media as we speak. So Saibo Kamara, Gala, PRO arrested. Sources also say that Bayo Sonko, Gala member, also say that to confirm that to the audience in this country. So let's do a bit of Africa roundabout with this short break and we'll be back. Welcome back to the program, and be reminded that you are listening to the daily podcast live with me, Alhagie Fatty. So let's proceed with standard news paper, whereas ex-minister says Barrow likely to win unless opposition's coalition emerge. Former Gambian Minister of Information, Dr. Ali Ijao, Demba Ali Ijao, has cautioned that unless the fragment opposition parties in the country forgo a coalition ahead of 2020 presidential election, President Barrow stands a strong chance of securing another term in office. Jao, who served as Barrow's first Minister of Information after the fallout of Yahya Jammeh in 2017, made the remarks in his recent analysis of the country's evolving political dynamics, assuming that there will not be a 2016 style of opposition coalition. President Barrow stands a much better chance of winning the polls. Jao wrote on his Facebook page. He added, as we approach the 2026 presidential election in less than 16 months' time, the trend topic of discussion, particularly among the political parties, is a selection of a flag bearer. While for the National People's Party, NPP, with President Adam Barrow intending to go for a third term, they don't seem to have that problem. The opposition, especially UDP, is going to be a make or break decision. Make or break decision. We have had the UDP inviting applications from those interested in being chosen as a party's presidential candidate, but it's almost quite certain that the Secretary General and party leader Hussein Udabo would be the eventual candidate, he said. Jao added that reasons are quite obvious, and they include the tradition in this country of not challenging the party leader for any position. However, in the course of the UDP, there are also other compelling reasons why Mr. Dabo is likely to be their candidate. The party is obviously undergoing some challenges of unifying its ranks and file, particularly on the issue of getting a consensus candidate. Therefore, even if Mr. Dabo had ever contemplated stepping down for a younger candidate, some people had been calling for such a scenario could be determined to the unity of the party. He said it is quite obvious that UDP is presently composed of at least two inconsolation fractions spelled between supporters of KMC Mayor Talib Ahmed Bensouda and those of Brikama Area Council Chairman Yankuba Dabo, and Hussein Dabo's leadership of the party is serving as the thread that holds those factors together. Therefore, the moment he lets go, the center is likely to be disintegrated, and that could spell disaster for party. particularly during his crucial time with such as scenarios. Therefore, Mr. Dabo does not seem to have much choice but to continue to lead the party, at least until after 2026 presidential election. In contrast, added that MPP appears not to be faced with such a leadership challenge, although some political analysts are also of the view that President Barro's reluctant going for third term, apparently because there is no one within the MPP who has the charisma of holding it together. Let alone be selectable. Therefore, just like Dabo of UDP, Barrow also does not seem to have much choice but to continue to lead the party at the election. So, very interesting article from the Standard News paper, which is another reason why President Barrow is more likely to contest for the flag bearer for MPP because he's also choiceless. So still with daily podcast roundup on this in this frequency. The Mayor of Kanifing Municipal Council, Talib Ahmed Bensouda, yesterday appeared in the most anticipated testimony before the Local Government Commission of Inquiry, answering questions about various aspects of a council's operations, including its financial management practice, threshold, and government structure. Asked about the number of councillors and committees established by the council, Bensouda replied that there are 19 councillors at KMC and 12 committees, including the finance, contracts, establishment, and appointment committees. On this nomination process for councillors, particularly those representing interest groups, the mayor explained that some councillors were nominated by specific interest groups, such as the National Youth Council and the Association of Differently Able Persons. The mayor was asked about his familiarity, that is familiarity with the council's financial management practice, including the threshold for expenditure approval. Have you had a threshold in relation to the finance of council, the lead council party government acts? The mayor responded by saying, the contract committee, the contract that is the contract committee has set out the threshold of 500,000, but governments argued that only the council should set such a threshold. The mayor, however, disagreed, saying no, the contract committee and the finance committee recommend to the council, then the council resolve on the matter. Asked about his role in the financial decision making and whether he should be involved in approving expenditures, Bensouda maintained that his role is to ensure that the council's structures are in place to enable the CEO to execute financial transactions. He referred the lead council to a letter written by the mayors of the Ministry of Local Government in 2018 proposing amendments to the Local Government Act. The letter suggested that the Act be amended to vest executive power in the mayor rather than CEO. However, the mayor said the ministry did not consider amending that part. Hearing continues as well. So, this was exactly the testimony of the Kanifing Mayor Ahmed Bensouda yesterday, and his testimony also continues today, as you can rightly see. And we remind that you are listening to the World Daily Podcast Live coming to you from our studios at Gaming. My name is Alhagie Fatty, and this is your daily podcast. So for more on that now, let's join the BBC Inquiry team, all that you need to know regarding the presidency of the Al-Shahara presidency. For more on this with the BBC Inquiry team. So it's like we having a connection issue with that one there.
This is coming with the backdrop of a country that is still in conflict and there is no political solution. So there's a lot of tension in the background. Any small clash could escalate to something very big. We have people who are being pushed to the extreme and their mentality and their practices.
To Suwaida's west lies the state of Israel. Israel sees outbreaks of violence close to its border as a threat to national security. The recent involvement then of Syrian forces in attacks against Druze prompted Tel Aviv to launch attacks on Syria's capital, Damascus, to ward off the government militia. This led to another layer of complexity in the recent conflict.
Israel immediately interfered to try to stop the advancement of his forces. They didn't want any army in that part of Syria. So Israeli interference made things even more complex because here, for the rest of the Syrians watching, they created an association between the interests of Israel and the interests of the Druze. And therefore, they saw some Druze as traitors. And that fueled the anger more and made more people willing to join the government forces and volunteer and go and fight the Druze in Suwaida.
Our first expert witness says the conflict in Suwaida is an illustration of the deep distrust between the different religious communities within Syria.
I think the problem is that there is no institution to resolve all the issues and differences. So some of the disputes about grazing land, farming land, and in a country where you didn't have a justice system that you trust, you don't have state institutions that are legitimate, all these issues don't get resolved in a proper way. So the lack of legitimate institutions make these things only worse and worse, and if there's no civic way of addressing all the issues, then the solution is violence. People take matters by their own hand.
Let's now then take a step back and look a little more closely at the roots of the Druze people and their interests. Part 2. Fraternal Ties.
My name is Makram Rawah. I'm an assistant professor of history at the American University of Beirut.
There are roughly 1 million Jews worldwide. More than half of them live in Syria. Other significant Druze communities are found in Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel.
The Druze are natives to this region ever since the 10th century. They are definitely a Muslim group, but they are not Sunni Muslims, meaning that they do not subscribe to the Orthodox version of Islam. Ultimately, they have the same Islamic beliefs, meaning that they believe in the Prophet, they do subscribe to a version of Islam. They don't like any form of religious extremism, and in general, they don't like anyone interfering in their own religious, communal, and political affairs. And in a way, one of the most striking features that they have is their strong tribal and fraternal links, which transcend borders, time, and even geography.
Our second expert witness is himself Druze and says these fraternal links within the community are an essential part of its culture.
The tribal nature of the Druze is important, adding to it the component of their belief in reincarnation. When you take this, and here I'm not trying to explain the religious element, but rather when you believe in reincarnation, when you believe in a way that all Druze are brothers. So if you actually meet a Druze, this person could be your brother in this life, or the former life, or the future life. And to be fair, myself coming from this community, I was never taught this by my parents, but it is there in my DNA.
The sense of the bigger community extends across the border both into Lebanon and Israel.
The Druze in Syria and in Lebanon don't really have a direct relationship with Israel. The Druze in general, when they look at Israel, they look at their brothers who are inside the Israeli state. So when they talk to Israel, they're not talking to the official Israeli state, they're talking to their brothers across the border. And the Druze in Israel are part and parcel of the state. And more importantly, they have served in high-ranking senior positions in the Israeli army and in very elite units.
We've said that when Israel attacked Damascus at the height of the violence in Suwaida, it was protecting its own security interests on the border. But our second expert witness says there was also another motive, and it had to do with domestic politics.
It was clear when the Israelis came to the aid of the Syrian Jews, they were not doing it because they liked the Syrian Jews, but rather they were trying to appease the Israeli Jews.
The The Druze reject the leadership of the president, preferring instead, as far as possible, to manage their own affairs.
All of a sudden, with the fall of Assad, the Druze doubled down on their mutiny against the state because they did not want to be second-class citizens. And the issue is that in this region where the fighting took place, 90% of the people there are Druze. So it does not make sense for the central government to actually be managing their affairs.
But this hasn't helped protect them from religious-based hostility and attacks.
You cannot portray them as not indigenous, so the only way to delegitimize them or to demonize them is to simply say that they have a skewed version of Islam. In the tradition of the Druze and the tribal traditions, it's actually the ultimate death is to shave someone's mustaches. But the fighters of Sharia went ahead and captured senior Druze clerics and shaved their mustaches on camera.
Which begs the question, where does Damascus and the leadership of interim President al-Sharaa, who took power last December, stand in all of this?
Part 3. President al-Sharaa.
Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa's past is both as a militia leader and a politician. During the Assad regime, al-Sharaa led the Sunni Islamist rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which controlled most of Idlib province in the northwest of Syria. Then came his lightning overthrow of the dictatorship, which ended the civil war.
Syrian rebels declare Damascus is free as the Assad family's half-century in power ends. The BBC is there.
Shara's legitimacy was nearly uncontested. He was very, very popular. Syrians across regions echoed the sentiments that he held the full weight of revolutionary authority. Of course, given that he has dismantled 5 decades of authoritarian rule in a military way.
Our third expert witness is Rahaf al-Dougli, lecturer in Middle East and North African Studies at Lancaster University in the UK. She says that the great faith initially placed in the country's new leader has been rapidly unravelling.
I think after his rose to power, most Sunnis held around him as their savior, but at the beginning also we saw voices from other backgrounds and other communities that they are welcoming his ascendance to power, and they were ready to give him a chance. But however, we see that his popularity went down among different components of the Syrian society.
In March, more than 1,400 people were killed in northwest Syria, according to a Syrian government fact-finding committee. The violence began after Assad loyalists carried out deadly raids on government security forces. In the days that followed, there were widespread attacks on Alawite civilians. Whilst some eyewitnesses accused members of the security forces of involvement, al-Sharaa's government denied this, pledged to investigate individual violations, and said commanders had not ordered the revenge attacks.
He promised minorities protection, but we didn't see that genuine approach to minorities to include them in the political process. I don't think it was genuine. There was a very little practical approach towards speaking to these minorities by going beyond the religious leaders.
Amongst al-Sharaa's fledgling administration, former members of his HTS organisation play a dominant role, controlling not only the presidency, but also key ministries such as defence and the interior.
I think the current leadership in Syria has missed on some of the greatest opportunity to bring or to unify Syria together. There have been so many ambiguous directions, weak institutional developments, and lack of participatory mechanisms throughout these 7 months. There is a very opaque decision-making, a lack of transparency, and there's a lot of ruling through spectacle or ruling through surprise rather than clear, systematic way of transformation.
That said, our expert witness concedes that the task of facing Syria's leadership is both complex and immense.
Even if someone came with a very civil ruling and with democracy, you need long-term process to change these kind of authoritarian legacies and also to build a political culture that accepts and more welcomes inclusivity and transparency and plurality. However, I think there is still a lot of things to be done. I think there are some quite big mistakes that have been committed in the last few months. And I think Al-Sharaa still has a tiny opportunity to bring Syria back to unity and to build the trust if he takes practical steps from now and not wait for Western engagement and neighboring countries' engagement to give him that legitimacy. I think that he really needs that legitimacy from the Syrian people and not from external actors.
But how might those external factors in neighbouring countries and the region as a whole perceive their future alongside the new Syria? Time for our final expert witness.
Part 4. A fractured landscape.
The overthrow of the Assad regime and the transitional government led by Ahmed al-Sharaa significantly redrew the map, of course in the first instance domestically inside Syria, but also has had significant consequences and shifted the balance of power across the region.
Borja Osalik is a senior research fellow in Middle East and North Africa security at the think tank RUSI.
Well, it has to do with the very identity of al-Sharaa and what he represents, which is he comes from a lineage ideologically of Salafi jihadism, of extremism. He has stated that he has shed that past. However, he comes from and now represents, I think it would be fair to say, an Islamist political view.
Our fourth expert witness is referring here to al-Sharaa's prior links to extremist group Al-Qaeda. At the start of his leadership, there were persistent questions within the international community as to how these links might affect the direction of the country. But when President Trump moved to ease sanctions, other countries followed suit. Perhaps, though, the most obvious shift emerging from the new leadership of Syria is the shift to a Sunni president. This could fundamentally rebalance Syria's relationships within the region, most notably with its powerful neighbour and former ally, Iran. Iran is run as a Shia theocracy. It supported the Assad regime during the civil war, using Syria as a crucial transport corridor for weapons to supply the militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah in turn deployed thousands of fighters to support former dictator Bashar al-Assad's regime.
I think there is a strong sense that Iran is not welcome in Syria. I don't think Iran is welcome for a number of reasons, and Iran stepped in very firmly, very aggressively to prop up the Assad regime, to support it through the course of the multi-sided civil war. And it militarily supported, assisted Assad government forces to crush protests, civilian protesters across the country. It enabled and empowered Hezbollah to come into the fray, to also be part of the pro-Assad front against rebel groups and protesters and other activists. And so Iran's legacy inside Syria over the course of the war, but also predating that, is very negative from the Syrian point of view. And so there is very little appetite for re-engagement with Iran, given this dark and stained, tarnished history of engagement.
Another country which seen its fortunes change as a result of the shift in power is Turkey, but this time in the opposite direction. Turkey was a key supporter of the Syrian opposition to Bashar al-Assad and became an ally to the interim Syrian government with both shared Sunni Islamist roots and strategic interests.
So the one key aspect of how this has created change is that Turkey emerged, or has been described as, being the ascendant power in Syria. It doesn't necessarily mean that Turkey is now the kingmaker in Syria. Since December and the overthrow of the Assad regime, a common view has been that Turkey is the primary winner. Turkey, along with Sunni majority Arab states and Iran, Shia power, is on the losing side. But overall, I think it would be premature or short-sighted to say that Shia Iran is on the back foot and has lost Syria, and now Syria is in the hands of a Sunni-led axis. I think whilst actors who have a high level of involvement and a stake in the future of Syria are Sunni majority, I don't think this is a battle of Sunni versus Shia in the reimagining of the Syrian state.
Understood. Which brings us to Israel. Where is Israel in all this?
Israel has described Shara as someone who cannot be trusted, that there was no way that he genuinely shed his militant jihadi past. And so from early on, government in Israel has described Syria as a state that poses a serious threat to Israel's national security.
Aside from managing these substantial shifts in regional geopolitics, Syria has another pressing concern, and that is to shore up its finances by developing trade.
Al-Shara in Damascus needs to take action promptly and effectively to reinvigorate the Syrian economy, to draw investment into infrastructure projects, to improve the livelihoods of everyday average Syrians across the country. He has tried to enlist American support, and he has succeeded in that, I think. The Trump administration was very vocal and proactive in lifting US sanctions, and European states followed suit as well. And so this has been hugely significant. But to do that, to succeed in attracting Western endorsement of his administration, of his rule, Al-Shara has had to create a distance with Iran.
This delicate positioning between Syria's neighbours and economic interests underlines the difficulty that Syria's interim government faces. So now we return to our question. What does the recent conflict in Syria tell us about al-Shara's presidency? The government in Damascus is faced with the monumental task of unifying the country's vast array of religious factions after 15 years of civil war. The new government is led by a Sunni Muslim. Sunnis represent 3/4 of the population, and the clear accusation is that other Muslim minorities have faced not just marginalization, but massacres and violent reprisals. The violence in Suwaida is but one example of the difficulties the country faces. In September, Syrians will have a chance to make their own decision about the country's leadership. The hope is that a national election will help heal some of the divisions of Syria's past.
Well, in September, Syrians will make their own final decision. Well, bear in mind that there was a BBC inquiry relay on King FM and King TV for your daily podcast, all that you need to know about the Gambia and current affairs. And I'm afraid that is what we have for you for today's edition from me, Alhagie Fatty, and the rest of the team. Till we come again tomorrow, God will have a peaceful day. Goodbye.